Where can I see? Check if this actually actually is. All right. Okay. Finish this function. Get first array. Turn array first card.
Is indeed correct. Great job. We are back at our leads tracker app, and now you are going to do what I did previously, which was to refactor the render leads function so that it takes a parameter, which I suggest you should call leads, that it uses instead of the global myLeads variable, this one right here. So hopefully you remember how I did this or are able to wing it on your own. Anyway, please also remember to update all of the function invocations across the file as well. It is a good idea to update the name as well, but it's not strictly needed, so I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not you want to do that. Just go ahead and give this a shot right now.
Refactors function so that it takes parameter leads, and then all this bundle like this. The leads and this. I'm not wrong.
Okay, hopefully this went well. Let's do this. So we are going to create this function so that it rather takes in a parameter here, which we are calling leads, instead of referring to the global myLeads variable. So then we simply need to replace myLeads with what we've called our parameter, like this in these three places. And that's it. I also want to remove leads from the name and then go up here, change the name, and also pass in the myLeads variable. Do the same thing here. And we've cleared out the myLeads variable, pass in myLeads, which now is just an empty array. And finally, down here, pass in myLeads like that. Let's run this to verify that it works. Save input, delete all. Yes, great job. Let's move on.
Not much. Nothing much.
In this challenge, we are going to set the stage for the Save Tab button. I'm going to write the HTML for you first, and then you are going to take over and do the JavaScript part of it. So we do a button like that. It should be called Save Tab. We run this. We can see the Save Tab button and then store it in a tab BTN.
Const. What is tab button? Would tab go to document. Get element by ID. Or this tab btn. Boop. And boop. Listen for click on tab btn. Pair go to the console. Okay, so app again dot add event listen open. This is going to be clicked, and then a function commas function open, and we do this log pair LinkedIn URL console log pair LinkedIn account. I don't know LinkedIn URL, so paste in. Yes.
Variable. And then you are going to hook up an event listener with this button, navigating the actual into this. When it's clicked, you are to log out my LinkedIn URL to the console. And the way you grab a hold of that LinkedIn URL is through navigating into this tabs array that actually has an object as its only item. And that object has a key value pair of URL and the actual string value of the URL to my LinkedIn profile. So this might sound a little bit weird, like why am I forcing you to do all this complex stuff of navigating into this array and into this object and fetching out this value right here? Well, you'll understand this when we implement this with the Chrome API that actually gives us access to the current tab we're on at any given point, because then we actually have to do such a navigation. So I'm just prepping you for that. So you have to remember how to work with arrays and objects. That's great to get some practice on. If you struggle, I will of course show
Actually, const app btn equal document get all this app slash n, right? Correct. Listener clicks to app btn add event listeners to click commas function, do this, do that, bada bing. So we do console dot log inside list. Oh, this app. And then it's going to be 0. And then how do I find stuff in the .url? Let's try this. Run. Cannot reading 0. Try this. Do 1. Zero. Right, and then we do. Can I do dot this? Let me try this. Yes. Yes. Save this. Right.
Show you the solution as well. After that, let's just URL right here. And how do we navigate into the first? Logged out.
Yeah, baby.
Next step
Keep
is to
going.
actually save the URL instead of just logging it out, because obviously this doesn't do the trick for our app. We need to save it to local storage, we need to add it to the my leads array, and we also need to trigger a render so that the fictional lead here actually will be rendered on the page when the user hits the tab button. So to achieve this, you basically need to do more or less the same thing that you're doing inside of the input button. So hopefully you've got this. If not, no worries. I will of course show you the solution when you return back to this screencast.
Well, instead of logging it out, delete this. How do we save the URL? We want to save the input value, and this is going to be 0, going to be nothing. When we click save, then we do local storage, local set item, item for this my lead renders apps. In it for this my tab Json string by for this apps renders my tab. Try this www.google.com. Object it's saved as apps. Save at my tabs. Check select. Yeah, save tabbed app. It's going to this 0 and then dot rl. And unexpected token. What is it? Expected token. Google www.com. Not reading length. Stuck here.
Okay, let's do this. So the first thing I want to do is push it to the my leads array. So we'll do my leads dot push and then pass in, of course,
My lead. Not tap dot push. I suppose tabs. That's why. My lead push. Want to push it. Value. Input. Dot value. Input L dot value. L value. And we input L dot value is equal to, and then we do locust that item save tab tabs dot stringify open my lead, right? Save it into Json stringify. What do I stringify? Tabs. Is it tabs or my lead? Let me. Yeah, let's. Yeah, this is going to stringify my lead. My lead. Then we save it. Place my lead. Right. Let's see. Run www. Yes. Does it save in a different place? Different. Save tab. My tabs. Let's watch the video.
okay, let's do this. So the first thing I want to do is push it to the my, comment out this one for now, local storage. Next up, we need to save the my leads array.
My lead. Oh my. Tabs. Open bracket. Dot URL. Save tab. Tabs. Tabs. Run. Save tabs. Object. Tabs. Per hub. Huh. I think I did something wrong. Let's get some hint. Let's get
to local storage. Luckily though, we know how to do this. That's the exact same line as we have down here. Local storage dot set item. The my leads, which is the key, should be set.
hello. Logan. Hey, what's up?
To the stringified version of the myLeads array.
Can you hear me well? I just set up. I just fixed some stuff on my in Streamlabs, so I might sound weird today. Might be choppy. Maybe it's a little bit better. I don't know yet. I will rewatch this and see if it's better. Do you guys hear me clearly? Is it like choppy? Choppy and like not clearly. Yep.
So let's just remember how this looks and rewrite it up here. I want to rewrite it because it's a little bit of a complex expression, so it's good to get that practice. Local storage set item. Which item? Well, it's the myLeads key, which is what it's called. And here we are going to set it to the myLeads value. However, we need to stringify this value first. So we'll do Json dot.
I wanna save it in another. I see. Thing. But it's gonna be more complex than this. Not some overcome stuff. Answer. Can you do this? myLeads. Yes.
Stringify that array. Rewrite to see it.
How to get the code? How to tab?
So we now have a working dummy version of our tab button. However, it's kind of useless because if I hit the save tab here once, twice, 3 times, you can see we're just rendering out our hard-coded tab URL, which we have here. So what we of course rather want to do is the following. We want to be able to open up our Chrome extension on any URL, and then when we hit the save tab button, the extension should head over to the address bar here, grab a hold of this URL, and then boom, save it in our list of leads. So my question for you here is, where in our code, that is on which line, should we go ahead and try to talk with the Chrome API to ask it for the current tab URL? Just take a guess at where in this file we need to do that. Well, the place we want to do it is right here. When the user has clicked on the tab button and this function has been triggered, here on line 20, we want to grab the URL of the current tab. Basically, what we are doing here, but we want to do it in the real world, not just using the made-up hard-coded array I've written up here on line 14. So then the question is, well, how do we ask the Chrome browser for this URL? And yet again, we will resort to Google. We'll simply write Chrome extension get current tab. That gives us a bunch of results. And on first place, you can see the developer.chrome.com, so the documentation. If we head into that, you will see chrome.tabs. Okay, description. Use the chrome.tabs API to interact with the browser's tab system. Sounds about right. If we scroll a bit down, we'll see manifest. So it turns out that we have to do some changes on our manifest file. Namely, we have to add this permissions and then fill in tabs. Okay, that's fine, but not really what we're looking for. We're looking for the JavaScript code in order to actually grab a hold of the tab URL itself. If we continue scrolling down, we get to this really discouraging list of a bunch of methods of this API. And this is so typical. When you're searching through documentation, it's very often difficult to find the answer as a beginner. So actually, what I would do is go back to the results we got on google.com, because there we can find a Stack Overflow question that looks much more humanly understandable.
Yes.
How can I get the current tab URL for a Chrome extension? Okay, let's click into that one. You can see there's a person that has a problem that looks like ours, and that person has even provided some code of how they're trying to solve this today. Chrome.tabs.getSelected. Let's scroll a bit down and find an answer, because that's normally where we find a piece of code we can use. So here you can see, just an FYI for your info for people from Google, the method the original poster uses is deprecated. Okay, to get the tab the user is viewing and only in the window they are viewing, use this, chrome.tabs.query. Okay, and then we pass it in an object with some data and we get this function with tabs and a lot of code. But actually, it looks very promising. So what I'll do then is what all developers do almost every single day, which is to copy code directly from Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
So I'll copy this
Copy code.
and just paste it in here. Because this is where we want to talk with the Chrome API. I'm going to remove this comment. And now we suddenly have this hairy, strange looking code, which we haven't written. That's not comfortable. And we can also see that it's not following our conventions for writing code. For example, it uses semicolons, which we don't like that. And it also uses the var keyword, which we don't use either. It's the old way of writing variables in JavaScript. We want to replace that with let or const. Now I'm just going to use let, as I'm not really sure what the point with these variables is at this point. I just want to clean it up. And storing them as let variables will definitely work. So let's just do that. However, now that we at least have the code according to our conventions, it's time to break this down and really understand it. And we'll do that in the next cast. Okay, now that we have this little snippet of code which we copied from Stack Overflow, it would be really tempting to actually try to run it and just console log out tabs at this point, for example, just to figure out what's going on here after this function is being triggered. But actually, if we try to do that, run this code, hit the save tab, we'll see that we get an error. Cannot read property query of undefined. That's because chrome.tabs, that's a so-called API, application programming interface. Sounds really scary, I know, but don't worry about that now. All I wanted to say is that this is an API that is only available to us when we're running the code in the context of a Chrome extension, like this, which you can see here. Now we are running the code in the context of this Scrimba mini browser here, and we don't have access to the chrome.tabs, meaning it's undefined, as our error message is saying, because it's trying to read the property query of something that is undefined. So we actually just have to try to make sense of this code and try to configure it how we think it should be, and then deploy it to see if it works out in the wild. So what I'm going to do, I'll delete this console log tabs, and actually I want to delete everything inside of this function, because we are going to figure out what we will do inside of this function on our own by looking back at Stack Overflow. And also, I actually want to comment out these lines of code, because while it's okay to copy to get it into the code base, I want to write it with you to break it down step by step so that you understand it properly. So with this in the background, let's rewrite it and see if we can make sense of it. So the first thing we write is Chrome, which is a variable that we'll have access to when we are running the Chrome extension. And that is an object, and that has a tabs key. And the tabs, that is an object as well. And that object has a query method like that. So here we're kind of saying, hey, Chrome, I want to grab a hold of your tabs. Or more specifically, I want to query you for some of the tabs. Well, then which tabs is the next question, and we'll specify that inside of the query using an object. To begin with, I'm going to say, well, I want the active tab, because I'm specifying active has to be true. And which tab is that? Well, if we look back at our slide here, you can see that in this situation, we have one browser window that has 3 tabs, but it's the LinkedIn tab that is the active one. So it will give us this tab. However, here we can also say that we ought to specify current window to be true as well, which is a little bit weird. What does that mean? Well, imagine this case. If you actually had another browser window in the background, well, the Chrome API would know about this. So naturally, you'd have to specify, well, which one of the 2 windows are you looking for? And in this case, the active window is the one in the front right here, and that is where the LinkedIn tab is located, where we have our Chrome extension open. Also, we have to specify, well, current window. So we need that to be true as well. So here we are calling the query method and passing in an object that describes which of the tabs we want. And then, as we did up here, where we start with a specification and then write a function as the second argument, we'll do the exact same thing in the query function as well. We'll write function like that. And this function will be triggered when Chrome has found the tab we have told Chrome to look for. And when Chrome triggers this function, it'll give us a tabs variable like this. It's a parameter in this function. So now we would get access to the tabs. And this console log would work if we were running this in the context of a Chrome extension. Let's now bring down the console, break this up a little bit, because the question is here, what do we want to do inside of this function? Well, it's through this tabs keyword here that we will actually get a hold of the URL, the string in the address bar. So it's inside of here that we actually have to push to our myLeads array, save to local storage, and call the render function. So I'm actually going to copy this code and paste it in here like that. And now the question is, well, what does this tabs variable include? How do we navigate to the URL value inside of this variable? Well, it just so happens to be that it's constructed in this exact way. And how did I know that? Well, because here on Stack Overflow on our question, we could see that on the question below that a person got it to work by doing var tab equals tabs 0, which is exactly what we're doing here. And then on the next line, it did tab.url, which essentially is our .url here. So it turns out that this is the way to get a hold of the URL. But at this point, there's a little problem. Since we have defined tabs here and also up here, these two variables will be in conflict with each other. And obviously, we don't need this hard-coded variable anymore. We want to use whatever value we get directly from Chrome. So we can keep this and just leave this how it is. Now let's clean up this a little bit. And then finally head over to manifest.json, because we saw in the Chrome extensions documentation that we had to add the following to our manifest file. So permissions, and then that is an array, and here we specify tabs. So now we are telling Chrome that we want to be able to work with the tabs in the Chrome extension. Otherwise, this Chrome.platform tabs simply wouldn't work.
Social media for
so in the next cast, we'll go ahead and deploy this so that we finally get to try our entire application out in the wild.
What the final version?
So let's deploy the final version of our app. First, you of course have to download the zip from this scrim, and you can do that by clicking on the settings icon in the bottom right corner and then download as zip, which we did the last time around as well. And then make sure that you take these files and update the lead tracker folder that we also created in a previous cast. Or if you have been working locally alongside me, you of course can skip this step. But what's important is that the same folder gets the new updated files, because then we head over to the Chrome/extensions page. There we can see our lead tracker from previously. I'm going to hit details so that we open up the page for our extension, and there you can hit update. By doing that, Chrome will grab, there we can see our lead. What's important is that the same folder gets the new updated files, because then we head over to the Chrome/extensions page. There we
mate. Okay. What do you like? You cannot link it. Your HTML, or is that a different thing? versus code my background. I don't understand. For this, Google Chrome. Like part of the style.cs not working. That like you cannot link it or you cannot there's something wrong with your thingy couldn't run. You have to be I don't know what is not working. I know the style.cs. Oh, you want to look at my code for CSS? This? Oh, want to have a look at this? Basically, stuff really normal. But where are we now? We're deploying it. Download this. One point one. 1.1 version 1.1 guys. Prototype 1.1. Then we do Chrome extension. Manage.
We can see our lead tracker from previously. I'm going to hit details so that we open up the page for our extension. And there you can hit update. By doing that, Chrome will grab a hold of the new files and update your extension. Once that's done, we can open up a new tab, for example, and head over to a lead.
Open it. 8. Done.
We want to track. Here I've opened up Scrimbus CTO's GitHub profile. That's Sindre. Let's say we want to track this URL as a lead. Then
that's a interest. French. Injury. Looks more like.
And I'll hit the Chrome extension button. I'll choose my leads tracker. And here I can try Save Tab, and boom, our Chrome extension headed over to a tab.
This. I want to try it. In my feed. I think I should manage. Remove extension. Trackers. Don't unpack this. Python developers. Save tab. Boom. Bada bing, bada boom. Do it. Ooh. We got it. Hey. Finish.
Grabbed the URL and displayed it for us. That's awesome. We can also try our input field by just passing in a random lead, hit the save input, and there we go. It was placed here below the URL to Syndra's GitHub profile. So far, so good. Let's open up a whole new tab now. For example, Leanne's LinkedIn profile. You probably recognize Leanne from the Scrimba community, as she is our community manager. Let's open up the Chrome extension again and try the Save tab button. Yes, it worked. Really good. Now, the final button to try is the Delete All, and I'll hit that, and there you go. We have deleted all of our leads. This is so cool. We've now created a real-world product that can give value to sales development representatives, or basically any person collecting leads online, which is an activity that people in almost all companies do. Boom. So we have really created something of value that you can share with the world. So your JavaScript skills are starting to become dangerous.
Yeah, like JavaScript becoming dangerous now.
Congratulations, you have reached the end. Congratulations, you have reached the end of this section and actually built your own browser extension. How cool is that? And you should be goddamn proud of yourself for achieving that. And just enjoy the fact that you've learned all of these awesome concepts that we now are going to recap. So, what did we learn? Well,
this is probably this class.
We started out with the const variable. That is a critical part of JavaScript, and as you can see, once we learned it, we started using it much more than we used let. For all of these DOM elements that we stored in variables, we used const, as we were not going to reassign these. And speaking of DOM, we learned a lot of new things about the document object model. First and foremost, the add event listener. Down here at line 14, we hooked up an event listener with the tab button, for example. This gave us the benefit of not having to write the event listeners in our HTML. We controlled everything in the JavaScript file. And then also we learned about inner HTML. Down here at line 33, we had to use this because the .text content property just didn't do the trick when we wanted to render out list items like this. And finally, we also learned input value, which is another part of working with the DOM.
What part? How is this? Think of the code and find out what it's basically problem solving steroid. If this is problem solving, the other thing, problem solving. Mamma mia. Steroid.
And that was down here when we fetched out the value which the user had entered into the input field. Another thing we did is take one more step into the world of functions, namely we learned about parameters.
Right.
Which is what we defined here. We defined a leads parameter in the render function, and that gave us the ability to use this variable inside the body of the function. And also it required us to pass in the argument of my leads when we invoked this function. This is a crucial concept to understand if you are to make functions really reusable. So I'm really happy that we went through this. Next up, a super cool thing we also learned was template strings, because that gave us the ability to write strings on multiple lines, which looks much better. It's easier for humans to parse. And also we could use this $sign and square brackets in order to escape out of the string instead of having to use these plus signs, which quickly became unmaintainable and confusing to work with. And then a super cool thing we learned was local storage. Here we saved things in local storage so that we could work across page refresh. This is kind of your first exposure to a database. A very simple database, of course, but still very much the same concept. And that forced us also to learn about Json, which is a very common way of storing data in web development. You were forced to deal with this since you had to turn your array into a JSON array using json.stringify, and also we had to use json.parse to go the other way around. When we fetched a string from local storage, and that string just happened to be a JSON array, and we could parse it and turn it into a JavaScript array using the json.parse. Don't worry if you are confused about JSON parse and JSON stringify. It's totally okay to search for which one does what every single time you do it. I've done it again and again and again. But JSON is core. And one testament of that is the fact that you were exposed to JSON also in another way, namely with the manifest.json file. Here we had to configure our app, and I'm actually glad that the Chrome extension required this because you will see JSON in many different scenarios as you work as a web developer. Finally, one of the last things we looked into was objects in arrays, namely this tabs array.
Wait. This JSON. Structure. Yep. How can I say it? Basically, a delivery guys take your stuff and then deliver it to the transmit. Yeah, to a server. Yeah, to so it's basically just have to have like a JSON guy, HTML, build your house, build bone guy is HTML. Bones. Your bones is HTML. CSS, your skin. Brain is JavaScript. Then so you create everything. And then there's a delivery guy called JSON who is going to package you, ship you to the place. To let's say the web servers, to the servers. Human trafficking business. But that's how I look at this. That's how I look at JSON, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Alright, so yeah, just move on with the video.
Here, where you actually had an
30 plus
array where its first and only item was an object. So you had to first fetch out the 0th index and then do .url to fetch out the URL value of that object. And this is very common. Objects shoved inside of arrays. So it hopefully shouldn't scare you that much the next time you come across that. So look at this list. It is really comprehensive. And now let's do a little thought experiment, which might help you feel less overwhelmed of all the things you don't know anything about in web development and all these fancy words. Because let's say that you for 2 weeks ago asked a developer, like, how do you create a Chrome extension? And then the developer arrogantly replied to you, well, it's not hard. You just add an event listener to a button, then fetch out the input.value, take that value stored in an object and convert it to a JSON using json.stringify, shoving it into local storage, no big deal. You could just fetch it out later and use json.parse in order to get it back into a JavaScript array, and then render it out in the function, shove it in as a parameter, and just use a template string and inner HTML to display it on the screen. I mean, no big deal, right? I mean, imagine getting such a reply. You would probably feel that you would never ever learn all of this because there's so many concepts you didn't understand.
Exactly.
But actually, that reply from the developer is actually the exact thing we have done, and you have gone through it. So even though in and of themselves these names sound scary, you know that if you follow the right course, you can learn them. And you don't have to be afraid of any of the concepts you have yet to learn. Because whilst they sound super fancy from the outside, like Json, actually, they're not that complicated when you look into them. So try to just have that confidence in yourself that you know you can learn complicated three-letter acronyms, that they're nothing to be afraid of, because that'll calm you down and serve you well as you progress on this journey into web development. With that, let's actually put your skills to the test now, because you need some more repetition on these things. You need tons of repetition. These things take a lot of time to really get into your muscle memory. And we'll start with that in the next section, where you will do some quick challenges back to back. Let's move on.
Okay. We will keep this for tomorrow, guys. 11 sleepy. Yeah. At 8 tomorrow. 8 hours sleep. Roughly 8 back in business. Right? Guys. Have a evening, afternoon.